afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Economic Development Innovation Committee meeting. We have one item on our agenda today. It's the Downtown Raleigh Economic Development Strategy.
Well, I guess we'll just jump right into it. So I'll just remind the committee that you heard the first phase of this study earlier this year in February. And so what you're going to hear today from Mr. Bill King with the Downtown Raleigh Alliance is the final phases of the study that Council commissioned last year. So with that, I will turn the podium and floor over to Bill King with the Downtown Raleigh Alliance.
All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you for having me. Hopefully you have hard copies of the overall study. What I've tried to do is take the study and distill it down a good bit. So there's more in that study than I'm going to cover today. It is extensive as it needed to be for our downtown, but I'm trying to give you guys an overview, but then what we have for each area is really the things that we think could be worthy of focus and discussion. So just a reminder, this had 4 components to it. The first portion was really focused on the Fayetteville Street core. We delivered that study to you all in February. And then these last 3 components were really the scope, looking at our office market, how to support minority and women-owned business, and then catalytic projects to stimulate downtown. And we had a robust process. We had over 1,000 participants. We did a huge, big dream forum. In April, we had an annual survey with a lot of questions around this, almost 1,000 participants. Did over 60 interviews, 15 focus groups, so got a big cross-section of the community able to talk about this and give us their ideas and feedback. The team then looked and sort of rated different ideas and saw how they scored in both the in-person meetings and on the surveys to try to sort of sort through the feedback and figure out what was really most important for downtown. We have all of those results, so if you ever want to see more of that information and data, we're happy to share that. A reminder of some of the challenges and part of why we did the study. We certainly do have some challenges in downtown with connection, so you'll see that come up several times in the recommendations. We have what the consultants called the Great Divide, which is our Dawson-McDowell sort of mini highway running through downtown that kind of cuts us in half, as well as to some degree the state government campus. There is a lot of regional competition here in the Triangle and in Raleigh. And then, of course, we're dealing with sort of the impacts of office utilization and how that's changed since COVID. We have a lot of great assets. Our brand is authentic. It's locally rooted, 90% locally owned on the ground floor. A lot of great design and creative firms downtown. We have a wonderful dining scene. Our museums are tremendous, and then we've got a lot of investment going on downtown. So what we're trying to accomplish here with this study, we want to champion a downtown for all, so that's really important. So this was rooted in trying to touch as much of the community as possible, diversify our economy a bit more so that we're resilient, really position us as a center of innovation and design, which we are, but to bring that forward more, get more people downtown with a more active core, and then connect us to destinations and to the region. So that first report came out in February. We had 10 big ideas, really focused on the public realm, safety, family-friendly, North Carolina's Main Street, Fayetteville Street, and celebrating our Black business district. You'll see some of that in this study. So we rolled some of that into the first sort of recommendation area of this one, just so it's all in one final strategy. And there's already been really good progress here. So Fayetteville Street's redesign, which we talked extensively about in February, that RFQ has been released, I believe, and there's a lot of interest, I will say. A lot of firms are interested in it, so that's great. So I think you'll get some really good ideas from that. I'm not quite sure the timeline. Mr. Raleigh, if you have any information on that.
I don't know. It has been released. I'm not sure exactly when that submission deadline is. I think it closed. It is closed. So.
Oh, that's great. Okay, good. Well, that's moving forward. And then you all allocated funds in May for a lot of really tactical but really important public realm improvements around improving tree wells, the trash can pilot we've been doing, public art crosswalks, and artistic wayfinding. So you've already made some moves, so that's part of why you wanted the report earlier, is to go ahead and move things forward. So thank you guys for doing that. So this final report, which rolls it all together, really focuses on 4 key aspects of downtown. And so this is how I'm going to structure my comments: places, community, celebration, and connections. And you can see from the map here, we tried to touch all parts of downtown. So this does include Glenwood South, for example. It includes the Warehouse District, includes Seaboard Station and Person Street, in addition to our downtown core and Moore Square. So places really is, these are recommendations where fundamentally downtown needs to invest in its public spaces, its parks, and its plazas to make them more engaging and useful and get more people here on an everyday basis. We do big events really well. do a great job of that. We'll have another good weekend of that. We need to get people here every day, and you do that by making your spaces better. So a reminder on Fayetteville Street, removing the existing street furniture and making it a lot more active for outdoor dining and different other types of activations. So that's what the Fayetteville Street RFQ is meant to address, is changing your standards and then investing in cleaning up the space to allow for this. So we're very excited about that. Create a Fayetteville Street that looks more like this. Also involved in that is looking at lighting as well. So how to light the trees, that's something we want to do. Adding some pedestrian scale lighting and then uplighting of the building. So really excited about the work there that is moving forward. Our main reminder here is once you get it, please invest in it. So let's follow through on this and make sure that we take the good ideas that you guys get from whoever you hire and make the investment to make Fayetteville Street great. City Plaza is also included in that, which we're excited about, and obviously there's adding more shade because it's too hot. So this was really all covered in that first portion of the study. What this portion of the study looked at was take the rest of your spaces in downtown, public spaces, and define more specific uses for them. So we have a lot of public spaces, but we don't necessarily have a clear, always purpose for each of them, and so they end up not always being all that dynamic. So a good example, obviously Nash Square, right across from the building here. I think there's a good opportunity to renovate that. Still be nature-oriented, doesn't need to be just like Moore Square, but new landscaping, new furnishings, a little bit more purpose there. I think there's a good opportunity for that with the Civic Campus. You'll have obviously more people here. So Nash Square is a good example. Market and Exchange Plaza are maybe the best example of what needs to happen here. So those are the two plazas between Fayetteville and Wilmington. They tend to be areas where there's not necessarily a whole lot of productive congregation going on. So the team that looked at this looked at Market Plaza and said, you really ought to orient this towards exercise. You have the YMCA there. You also have CrossServe, CrossFit next to it. Play potentially for kids and dogs. You have residents on that block and the next block. And so people always are walking their dogs. They want somewhere to go. So make that kind of a playful plaza, and then take Exchange Plaza and turn that into a place for entrepreneurship. Put kiosks there, take advantage of the former Pizza La Stella space, and let's make that a place for entrepreneurship, particularly aimed at Black-owned businesses, which that's the historic Black business core. So that's a good example of this strategy of take the plazas and give them a purpose and invest in them so they have a clear, distinct vision for them. And then finally, for Moore Square, adding more kids play to draw Marbles visitors. 600,000 people go to Marbles every year. They're right there on the doorstep. If we add a few more components to make it more compelling for kids, we can get people to hang around for longer. So you can kind of see how this plays out in this image here. On the sidewalk there, you can see the Fayetteville Street recommendations made earlier of, hey, here's how you can sort of redo the space, clean it up, and then make it for outdoor dining and swinging benches, things like that. And then you can see the plazas would be flexible play space and vendor stalls. So you can see how it all knits together and be a lot more dynamic, 200 block than what we have right now. I think this also helps with safety as well. So these are areas where we have had some issues with that. I think it's gotten a lot better. But part of that is obviously the resources we've all put in place, but some of that's creating a lot more active, interesting space. And I think that would help with these plazas. Parking is a part of the places experience, right? And so two main recommendations here. The introduction of free 2-hour parking for visitors in city-owned decks. You guys control several thousand spaces in the Wilmington Street core, and those are also where the businesses that have been most affected by the last few years are. The ability to do that would overcome one of the biggest things we hear in our surveys and from stakeholders, particularly outside of downtown, about why they don't come downtown. And so obviously we know there's a push and pull to this. There's some real components to this from a budget perspective, so I know that has to be figured out. But if you're looking for something that would be high impact from a policy perspective, this is something our businesses were very vocal about. They feel like would make a difference. I feel like they're a little bit behind the 8 ball sometimes compared to some of the other activity centers in the region, which all advertise free parking. This does not. I'll also note that while making parking cheaper isn't necessarily always desirable, there's a lot of recommendations in here around bike and pedestrian improvements too. So we're not saying just make downtown car-oriented. What we are saying is we have to balance those things. There's still a lot of people who access downtown by the car. So this would be a major policy change we'd like you guys to keep considering and looking at. The other is upgrading the camera system in the decks to improve safety outcomes in them. So the cameras are quite old in the decks. Parking system's taken a real beating because of fewer office workers being around. So figuring out how to resource this would be a challenge, but I think it's something that's a very worthy investment. We have a lot of stairwells, a lot of sort of corners in these spaces. They can feel uncomfortable. And right now, the camera system is just not up to par. And so you've made a great investment in Connect Raleigh. This would allow you to then integrate the decks. I think it would allow for potentially somebody to be able to monitor at key times and be able to deploy resources faster. So these would be two things that would help the parking experience. While they're not sexy, I think they'd be really impactful. So from a places perspective, I'm going to stop here and sort of walk you through these main recommendations and pay attention to sort of the left side column. What I want to do to make this more digestible than the February report, which I know was a lot to take on, is to sort of, we broke it into 4 buckets and sort of pause here and look at these. And I've covered most of these. City plazas, consolidation of management and programming plan, we talked about in February. Public restroom access as well, we've talked about. I know that staff's been looking at. You have restrooms at the bus station and Moore Square. And then I just mentioned the deck camera improvements. So these are some of the things in terms of investing in public places. We have another set of recommendations around connections, so more of sort of streetscape and all. But I want to pause here and see if there's any immediate feedback on this.
I have some stuff unless someone else does. A couple things. On the changes to Fayetteville Street, I'm really happy to hear that the RFQ went out, that it closed. I would like to get moving on that as quickly as possible. I know there's a lot that goes into the planning process, but in a lot of ways, we know what we need to do. We just need to do it. Even if we can just start. I went to Charlotte recently for the NC State game. We won't talk about that outcome, but they're like a trade and try-on area. I haven't been down there in a while, and it looked very similar to what we could accomplish here. There are a lot of restaurants, a lot of people were out there. There was outdoor dining. I was in Minneapolis for Stonewall Sports, and they had an area too. It was really wide sidewalks. All the restaurants were in a row there, and that's where all the energy was. And we can do that on Fayetteville Street. We have the right-of-way space. We have the private sector investing in getting those storefronts open. The only thing they're waiting on is us, and we know we need to create more room, and so I'd like to do that as soon as possible. And so I don't know how we fast-track that, but I think we need to start moving on it.
Yeah, I think if you'll allow me just a second, and would maybe look to Ken or Donnie to come up, just to give you and the committee a sense of what the RFQ, the scope of it, to kind of frame up kind of what we are looking at. Ken, could you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say there's 3 major components as to what we're going to achieve. One is there's no regulating plan for Fayetteville Street. So if the private sector wants to alter the streetscape in any way, there's no standards against which to review that. So we have from time to time had major property owners along the street want to do something different in front of their building. And there's no process, there's no standards, there's no policy. So we're going to create that. So it's kind of like, what are the immutable things of Fayetteville Street that have to stay, and what can be removed, what can be changed? How can the street evolve over time to become a more vibrant place? The second thing is lighting was a big issue. Lots of folks would like to see more festive lighting. So how do we provide power to that lighting? How does it get mounted? So there's going to be a lighting plan. There's kind of also an electrical service plan that deals with how we can do even better job of providing power for special events and things. If you bring food trucks in, you can plug them in instead of running generators, stuff of that nature. And then the third component, I think, is to what you're speaking. One of the key recommendations of the downtown study, the economic strategy, is that there's just too much stuff in the way of outdoor dining in the streetscape. However, all that stuff has infrastructure, subsurface infrastructure. It has water, it may have power, other things in it. So we're going to try to get engineer's opinion, sort of analysis of what it would take to remove some of these streetscape elements, and what is a estimate of probable cost of doing so. I don't, obviously if the council has the will to deliver a lot of funds to Fayetteville Street, we could do a lot of this proactively. Another alternative is, since some parts of the street are more likely to have outdoor dining than others, maybe we prioritize and look for private partners who want to expand their outdoor dining experience, and we provide partnership funds available. But before we can do that, we need to have a better handle on what physically it would take to do that, and then what it would cost for each element to take out a planter, for example.
Are we talking like a 2-year timeline or 6 months?
On the study, I think we've.
It's about 12 to 16 months.
Yeah,
It just
12 to
feels-
16 months.
I mean, I'm
And
not
we're
sure-
in the selection process right now, so we're hoping to have a decision in a matter of weeks and then get someone on board. There's a contract negotiation, which always takes a little while, but I'm optimistic that this council will be accepting that contract.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, I mean, I'm not an expert like y'all, but that seems just way too long, 12 to 16 months. I mean, folks have been waiting and waiting, and it took us, what, a year, 2 years just to get this study.
Well, perhaps the infrastructure stuff is, can be front-loaded in the scope, because I say right now, the regulating plan is probably less urgent. It's needed, but we don't have any pending applications to alter the streetscape. But the other stuff, we could try to see if that could be front-loaded in the scope to get that moving a little faster. And since I think also doing that base level analysis should inform the regulating plan.
Okay, that would be great. And then the other point I wanted to make is I would like to get this parking, 2-hour parking thing. I'd like staff to take it and bring us options. Councilmember Fort and I met with business owner today, and they were asking us for this exact same thing. And I had mentioned that it was part of this study and that we could bring it up at committee today. So I would like to move that.
Sure. And just a quick reminder for the committee. So probably summertime, I think we brought this conversation back about parking. I think at that time, the council expressed a little reservation about the hit that it would, the amount of subsidy required to provide it and its impact on the parking fund. Now, I know that the ask, and I think transportation staff, I don't see anybody present, but I know the ask, I think, was for transportation staff to come back and provide some options that didn't have, I think, as significant an impact, if I recall. So that is underway now, and I'll get a sense of where we are.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember that discussion. Yeah. I will go on record and say that whatever the hit is, I think we need to do it. If we get more people downtown shopping local, that's money going back in, it's tax revenue. We're gonna get the money back one way or another. And so I would like to provide that relief. It's $2 per person, which objectively you would think, well, it's just $2, but the message it sends to people, I think, is pretty big. And I have heard this sort of become a consistent drumbeat from folks. So that's all I got. Anybody else for this section?
No, just echo your sentiments about at least staff getting something. Echo your sentiments about staff getting something to us so we can at least have the conversation. But what you're saying is what we're also hearing, that folks won't come from other parts of downtown because parking is a challenge. So to try to work through some system where we can at least do 2 hours, if we possibly can. So, and some way to validate that people are going to businesses and not necessarily just going to court or to other offices and stuff like that. So to try to figure that piece of it out.
Certainly, we can absolutely do that. And that conversation is already at the council table based on, I think, the last discussion that we had, but I'll check the stats to make sure we're advancing it.
Yeah, and that was a good point that I just remembered, and then Mayor. The conversation we had today was if there was a way to not make the businesses validate, but if you showed that you ate at a restaurant, went to a bar, went to a shop, then maybe that triggers the 2-hour free. And that avoids the folks that maybe just coming down to go to court or run an errand that's not sort of related to generating the economy down there. And I don't know how we would do that, but that's up to y'all to figure out the tech or whatever is involved. But maybe if there's and we don't want to put the burden on the business owners. I don't want to make them have to validate, but if there's a way to signal when you're exiting the deck that you made a purchase, then maybe you get the 2 hours. Mayor?
So this is more complicated, but goes back to one of our retreats when we did the what if question. And my response was, what if the city didn't own all these parking decks? And sitting here now going, okay, we own all these decks. There was talk at one time about selling one of them. And I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, we have this asset that you're saying doesn't, unless we charge all this money, it's a burden. And I'm just thinking, why aren't we thinking a little differently about this? That's a longer term question, but brought it up before, and we'll bring it up again. Maybe I'll show up for public comment and bring it up later. That's a joke. But I think that if we own these and they're not bringing in money, how can we turn that around and make this a land asset that can do more for our community?
Well, I'll just say to that point, I know that this is actually, I think, something that's a recommendation that's contained in the report related to redevelopment opportunities, and I know that there's some conversations internally happening along those lines as well. So it's something that's very much on staff's radar.
What about rentals of the parking decks until we can do something with redevelopment? I know a lot of people that would be interested in like renting out parking decks for different types of parties. I know a lot of people who would be interested in that. I don't know if that's an option that the city has looked into, but that's something that's at the top of my mind. I have a question specifically about Nash Square. How are you guys planning to initiate that process and that study? And is it going to be in collaboration with some of the Heat Island stuff that we've done? I remember how Morris Square looked before the redevelopment. I like that we're able to activate the park more, to have more activities there, like jazz in the park, and I go to run club out there. But there's no trees. Like, all of the trees are gone, and we only have two. The Nash Square is the last, like, park within downtown. And I know we're looking long-term at some of the Heat Island issues. And so I'm just, like, concerned about, like, loss of trees, and how are you guys thinking about working through that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so in the study, it goes a little bit more specific, does not recommend getting rid of the tree canopy. The tree canopy is beautiful. It's a wonderful part of the park. And actually, shade is a challenge in Moore Square. And the study talks about that too, of Moore Square is great, but shade does present for daytime activations, which we do as well. It's a real challenge in the summertime. So it does not recommend getting rid of trees. It talks about keeping it nature-oriented, but there are the landscaping is, I think, very dated. Mm-hmm. It doesn't lend itself to really much of any activity, even for the middle school kids who come over and play in it. It's kind of a hodgepodge. So ultimately, it'd really be up to the city, in terms of determining what that design would be. And the Parks Department, I think, would lead that if you were interested in it. But I do think, given that you're going to have the civic campus bring in a lot more people here, it feels like it's time. I think more activation would also help with some of the challenges in the park as well. But definitely not recommending getting rid of the tree canopy.
Okay, that was like my concern. That's something that a lot of people, because they hear about the Nash Square redesign and they're like, what are they going to do to it? Because they really like the park with the way it is, and I see there's opportunities to create more activation in it, but like I don't want to lose all of the beautiful like old trees that we have either. Yeah,
Totally agree.
Can I just add something to that, just for clarification? With Moore Square, we had a tornado come through, and trees were damaged with that tornado. And that was one of the reasons why those trees had to be taken down. They were no longer safe. And so, it wasn't like, oh, let's redesign this and remove the trees. It was like, we have damaged trees and a real safety issue.
Okay. No, I think
Okay.
that's all for this section. Thank
Okay.
you. Do you need us to do anything with these next steps, or are you already on this, Mr. Raleigh? You good?
Yeah, I think we got general direction on these.
Okay.
That's-
Okay, all right. Celebration is another one. So there's quite a few recommendations that orient around celebrating our history and our culture in Raleigh. There's a lot in the report here. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. You guys have already started the process here on funding this, but public art is a key component of this. I know people talk a lot about public art, all the time, but we could do a lot more to elevate this in downtown Raleigh. I think we've had good success with the moments we've had. If you came to our event a few weeks ago, we made public art a central feature of that and trying to get our community to invest in it. Not just the public sector, not just the city, but the private sector as well needs to invest in it fully and invest in the organizations that do it. But one unique advantage we have is we are the state capital. And so we are the capital of a beautiful, diverse, innovative state, and we ought to celebrate that through our art as well. So we see some really cool opportunities there. From the earlier report, we talked a lot about developing a family-friendly itinerary. I believe staff has already initiated some of this work around creative wayfinding that would lead people from the museums on the state campus over to Marbles through Moore Square. So I believe that's moving forward, which is great. There's raised crosswalks. I believe there's some crosswalk work as well going on around that area to make it a little bit safer as well for kids. We hear that some crossing Hargett Street and Blunt Street can be pretty intimidating. This is also where, again, investing in some of the play elements from Moore Square would be helpful. And this is the type of stuff that you could invest in. But one really cool thing that we've already seen success with that we initiated was the dinosaurs. So we just tried this out. Obviously, there's a dinosaur exhibit at the Science Museum, so we timed it for that. We have 3 of them, and this has been a much bigger hit than we ever thought. And they are strategically positioned to get you from the Capitol, state government area, over to Marbles. So there's one at Fayetteville and Morgan, one on Exchange Plaza, and one in Moore Square. It's been really successful. This is the type of thing we're talking about where having this type of creative wayfinding, people love this stuff. And it does get families moving, not just going to a museum and then running back to their car, but it gets people moving through downtown. So this is the type of thing that I think modest investment can be really important. Also, Raleigh's Arts and Entertainment District. So we talked about this some in the earlier report, but kind of want to lean in here more on the southern end of downtown has the opportunity to be an arts and entertainment district. So if you think about the convention center, the performing arts center, the amphitheater, and City Plaza, that's a lot of performance space in a really dense area. So leaning into this more, branding it this way, adding signage, adding art down here as well, allowing for some of that smaller scale frequent programming, I think would be really, really important and helpful. And then adding some of those nighttime anchors like sports bar, nightlife, things like that could add to the southern end of downtown. Along in this space of tenanting, and this is some of the work that we're doing as an organization, is to work on bringing the best of North Carolina to downtown Raleigh. We feel like we should celebrate the fact that we're the capital, and so when you walk around and you see the businesses, it should feel like the best of North Carolina, and you're already seeing some of that. Flavor Hills is from Jacksonville, Burial's from Asheville, Incendiary's from Winston-Salem. In addition to all the great local Raleigh businesses we have, that's a really interesting tenanting strategy, and I think that is one that could have some good success. It also broadens the type of businesses we can bring. The other thing here is being able to bring some special exhibits from area museums to downtown. We really want to be able to do that as well. We want the museums to come out, so we've been building partnerships there to get the museums out more. And so you can see how we sort of tenant downtown. There's a lot in the study. It goes really dense here. This falls a little bit less on the city as well, so this is more for your awareness in terms of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to recruit so that each part of downtown feels more coherent. And then finally, celebrating our Black entrepreneurship history. So expanding on the public art that's already on the sidewalks there in the Hargett and Wilmington Street corridor would be really important. So there's a lot of great history there. A lot of it is not known or super obvious, and so we feel like the sidewalk murals were a good start, but would love to see a much bigger, bolder lean into this. There's some big walls in that district that we feel like could celebrate the Black culture that helped build that corridor. It would align well with the South Park Heritage Walk, and then also could be used to encourage new and existing minority-owned businesses. So we don't want it just to be about history, but we also want it to be about the future. So that's another opportunity for celebration. So this is sort of the summary of some of the things we looked at here is investing in some public art around celebrating our Black business district, working to attract local North Carolina tenants, and really where there's an opportunity for the city there is to keep looking at your grant programs, which are great. The Building Upfit Grant and the Facade Grant are really great tools. Our small businesses love them. They appreciate them. They've been really impactful to them. So the more opportunity to invest in that, I promise you they use every dollar of it in a meaningful way. So those have been great programs. Thank you guys for doing those. Leaning into that arts and entertainment district, I think is a great way to liven up the southern end of Fayetteville Street and the southern end of downtown that's felt kind of dead. And then celebrating our North Carolina culture through public art. So this is really the celebration group of recommendations. There's more in the report, but these are sort of a high-level run through those. So I'm going to pause here and listen to any feedback.
Anybody have anything?
I have
Councilmember Ford?
a little bit of a question. So I know that we've got the skate park that's on the other end of, like on Capitol. It's temporary, and at some point they're talking about trying to relocate. You're shaking your head, so you've already heard these conversations. So what is the thought process about relocating some of their apparatus downtown? Because I think the lawyer in me is kind of like, how does that work with pedestrians and other folks, sidewalks, and how that works? And have you had conversations with our park staff about any of that?
I've not had an opportunity to have that conversation. I think there could be some cool opportunity. I also feel the risks as well, so I hear you on that. Somebody's got to ensure that and all that, but obviously that's been done before, and you all have been able to figure that out. So I do think it brings people, and so there's a great opportunity there. So we'd be very welcoming of a conversation on that. You do have to be thoughtful about shade. I think the one challenge with the current location, because it's temporary, there's no shade there, so that thing bakes in the summer. So wherever it'd be, you'd want to be cognizant of that, and cognizant of, again, okay, when does this close down and all of that. So there's definitely issues to work through, but I think it's something that we ought to entertain a conversation on, but have not had a chance to have one yet with parks.
Thank you.
That's a great question. I've been thinking about the skate park too. I know a lot of skaters. So my question is about public art. I'm a big fan of public art. Everywhere I travel to other cities around the country, they always have like really comprehensive public art. And so I'm just wondering for public art specifically, if you have like a repository of local artists that you could work with.
So actually, Raleigh Arts has that. So what's really cool is we just go to Raleigh Arts and we say, hey, can you give us the list? And they do. So they keep a great inventory, which has been super helpful. And we share that with partners as well. So when a developer even says we want to do a mural, Raleigh Arts has that list.
Awesome. Cool. Just wondering about that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're good. Thank you.
All right, we'll go into community here, which is really building more connections with our partners and institutions to build on innovation, life science, entrepreneurship, education, and design. And so we feel like, particularly post-COVID, some of the connections we had and some of the momentum we had here got lost a little bit. Obviously, we all had to sort of be apart from each other for a while. And so naturally speaking, some of the gatherings or institutions or events kind of melted away, and some didn't exist necessarily. And so this really looks at how can we strengthen some partnerships here that would actually help downtown's economy. So I'll start with the innovation triangle within a triangle. And so this is a big idea, but we have NC State, which is a tier 1 research university right on our edge. We already have Shaw University, which is a wonderful HBCU. We have St. Aug's in downtown, and we have Peace University. So we've got these great schools, but we're not very well connected here, particularly to Centennial Campus and NC State, the way that we are with the other universities, and that seems like a big missing piece. And even in the region, if you look at the way that Duke and Durham now work together, and now UNC's gotten very involved in downtown Chapel Hill, there's a great opportunity here to use a research university and partner with our other universities in a way to build this innovation triangle. So we feel like there's something here. This could also be an opportunity for us to get into the life science space. Life science, which I don't understand an enormous amount about, but we are a very strong region in this. The Triangle is a huge region, one of the best in the country at life sciences. We don't have much of them in downtown Raleigh. They do have them in other downtowns in the region, including downtown Durham and downtown Chapel Hill's building out that space. And part of how they do that is they partner with their universities. We should be in this space too. And I think there's a great opportunity. Life science lends itself to be a little bit more in person. It's hard to do that work remotely, so that's also a good thing for downtown. In order to do this, and the report goes really deep on this, you have to kind of build a partnership with a lot of different institutions and partners to build a speculative life science building. But that's how you kind of prove your market. So this is a longer play. This is not an immediate action here, but we think it could be really meaningful and important. And as a part of that, linking us more to Centennial Campus, which has obviously some life science on it and some innovative companies there. You know, we're sort of separated physically, but we're really not that far apart. So being able to build that connection out would be great, again, for our other partner institutions here. Exploring a downtown campus for more academic institutions, they can fill space. So whether that's a community college or others, I think there's some opportunities here to fill in with some of the programs we don't have at our existing universities. And then along these lines, we want to obviously be able to attract innovative companies. And so looking ultimately at your business investment grant, which is your main incentive policy, to see if there's some opportunities to tweak that towards a per job grant basis, maybe even having some goals around product development and fundraising. It would make it a little more flexible for the type of growing companies that have done really well in downtown. The type of tech companies and all, but you know, they have to kind of get to a certain level right now to be able to use that. Not all of them are able to get there that easily, so this is a much longer conversation, probably one for this committee to look at over time, but would be a worthy one because I think we have a lot of companies in this space growing. One thing our consultants found is that we are the hub of creative and design firms in the region, but we don't talk about it. So when we asked them to say, what can we do to revive our office market? They said, you guys have a huge advantage here in the advertising firms, the architecture and design firms, the social media firms, the marketing. All of those people want to be downtown because they like the lifestyle. They like being near the restaurants and the bars and the retail. They love the public spaces, but we don't talk about it much. And so I think we still get tagged with a little bit of an image of sometimes being a government town or, you know, banks and law offices, which are great too. But there's a lot of recommendations here on how to leverage this more. And so, you know, doing things like reviving some of the design weeks. You know, we had that as part of Hopscotch before COVID. Creating some visual design for these corridors. You could see on the map there, for example, a lot of firms along Fayetteville, Hargett, Martin, and Hillsborough that have located there. If we made those look a little cooler and how we use the banners, how we use some art, how we, you know, look at the sidewalk design, that could create sort of that image of, okay, this is where the cool companies are. Because we already have them there, we just don't make it feel like it. And then again, looking at partnerships with universities, we have universities that have design programs. Could we create a space in downtown where all of them collaborate together? That'd be a great thing, where if you had students from Shaw and Peace and NC State and St. Aug's collaborating together on design in downtown, that'd be really positive. Finally, looking at expanding the capacity of minority and women-owned business ecosystem to support downtown. So we had one of our consultants was devoted almost entirely to this, so we spent a lot of time with this. And they looked at where the gaps were, and fundamentally there's kind of a gap in having an organization that is looking at all of that. So everyone has pieces they play, and we found this too when we've been in this space. We're good at getting space, we're good at getting storefronts, but we don't know a whole lot about business training, or we don't know about finding the financing. And so you have a lot of organizations that bring value, but there's not anyone overarching looking there to support our minority-owned businesses. And so you end up with these gaps, and it's hard to coordinate, and nobody quite has the resource or the time. So some sort of overarching organization or convening there would be really impactful to be able to move things forward that would actually help create a stronger minority-owned business ecosystem. Another idea here is piloting a small business storefront to co-locate business support organizations, so like SCORE and maybe Wake Tech's entrepreneurship program, things like that, so you could walk in and learn how to be an entrepreneur. I think there'd be a great opportunity there. And then expanding the pop-up program, which we have, which is for minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses, using those kiosks either on Exchange Plaza or even some of the vacancies you control to add diverse entrepreneurs. That's been a really powerful program. We had it for 2 years, and we've spun out 4 different businesses into permanent spaces in Raleigh, which has been great. And then the final portion of this community was on housing. And we mentioned this to you guys back in February, but we have a lot of housing coming to downtown. We don't have as much in the core. So you're seeing a lot of it along the west side of downtown. So you guys control a couple of spaces. You have the city-owned space next to the Omni Hotel. You control that. I know you guys had that out for housing a couple of years ago. And then you control One Exchange Plaza, which as the Civic Campus becomes real, at some point you'll be looking at moving those employees over. Those are 2 great opportunities, specific opportunities for you all to look at. There's also an opportunity for looking at your older city-owned parking decks. You got a lot of space above those. Is there something there where somebody could potentially keep parking there, keep public parking, but build housing there? Those are big, big pieces of land devoted to parking. And then finally, financing tools. So this is an area that needs more study, but we don't have as many financing tools here as some of our peers in terms of being able to incentivize certain types of housing, particularly in the downtown core. And so we had given an example here of Invest Atlanta, which is the development authority in Atlanta. Just since their current mayor came into office, they've gotten over 4,000 units created or preserved, and they're putting out really big loans. So last week they approved a $40 million loan on a downtown project that's creating 163 units at 60% AMI in a larger tower. So that's a picture of the tower. And the way they do this is loans based on tax-exempt bonds and tax allocation. So what that means is they're taking tax increment type financing and doing loans off of it. I think we do a great job here, and I think we have an incredible housing department and all. I think so. We're doing everything we can with the tools we got. I do think as we've gotten more complex as a city, as we've gotten more expensive, we're going to have to start looking at things like tax increment and all to examine this, because I think that's how you create that. So I know Councilor Fort, that was an issue that you're interested in us coming back with. So these are some examples of that. I do think there's some further work to do here, but there's an opportunity to create some more tools that some of our peers are using. All right, so I will pause there on the community bucket and take any feedback.
I just want to add that I'd like to see us put that one site next to the Omni back out, especially now that interest rates have dropped. I'm wondering if maybe we would get more interest in it, because I think that's a big opportunity. And then the One Exchange Plaza, I think it's a great idea that when we're ready to move folks over, that we do something with that property. I think it could be housing, or it could be a really cool hotel probably. And I think they both accomplish the goal of foot traffic. I mean, our hotels are constantly full. And the business owner that Councilmember Fort and I were talking to today, he actually told me that they get a lot of their shoppers from folks who are in from out of town for shows at Red Hat or a convention, and they're staying at the hotels and they walk one street over and they shop. And so I think either of those things could be great. But I definitely want to try to get that site 1 or 2, I forget which one it is, back out, because I know that it was a challenging financing environment when we put it out. So, anybody else?
Have,
Go ahead, Mayor.
have we actually done a study on One Exchange Plaza to see if it's convertible to housing?
Not to my knowledge, Mayor. Certainly something that staff could look into, but I'm not sure that there's a study that's been done to answer that question.
Can we do that?
Sure, we could evaluate.
Because we can sit there and talk about
Yeah.
this all we want, but if
Yeah.
it's not the way it was built, if it can't be converted, then we need to know that. And we need to know it now, not 3 years from now or 2 years from now when the Civic Tower is done.
Yeah, I think an assessment of what options we have, because I think hotel or residential is going to need similar or the same type of infrastructure. So figuring that out is a great idea, I think. Councilmember Black, did you have something?
I just had a question. You talked about life science and specifically what UNC, or not UNC, Chapel Hill and Durham is doing. And I wonder if you could speak, like, what are they doing? I hadn't heard about it.
Yeah, it's a good question. So in life science, what you essentially have to do, real quick, life science spaces are large. They often involve labs. So they're a bit riskier than if you just build an office space, because if there's no market for it, then what do you do with it? You've now built a lab that nobody needs, right? So to get that started, you always have to have a partner or partners. And so in other markets, it's usually the state or it's a major university or both participating with a city and private developer to essentially subsidize building the space to prove you have a market, recruit somebody into it, and then it kind of takes off from there. And what it ends up doing is it becomes a cluster. So life sciences like to be around other life sciences because they collaborate, they share talent, they take talent from each other. And so we have that in the triangle, we just don't have it in downtown, but we're seeing it in the other downtowns. So it seems logical that we ought to be able to try it. And so really the recommendation here is to convene a group of partners that would probably involve both universities, city, potentially state, and others to look at, can we pull that off? What would it take? It would be a big lift, and it would take some time to come to fruition, but that's sort of the path you have to take to get life science in.
Cool. I know we have some stuff that happens like that at the Science Museum. So they could be an interesting partner, and I know you said that there was a dead zone in that area over by like the building, the state building, and the museum. So I just was interested in like what you were talking about. But it just seems like downtown has a lot of different elements that could use more uplifting and connection. I don't have any questions. I was just curious.
Yeah.
And Chairman Melton, if I may, on this question of the life science sector in pursuit of additional opportunities in that space, I do just want to recognize that Raleigh Economic Development and the Chamber have done a lot and are really kind of taking a lead role, I think, in this particular space. I know I've had many conversations with them on this, and I know Bill has as well. So just wanted to acknowledge that there is some diligent work that's already underway in pursuit of growing our life science sector, specifically in downtown.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think if you look at these recommendations, the top three have more sort of policy direction and all, which you all have discussed on, particularly like One Exchange Plaza, or looking at financing tools, or looking at your policy. The bottom four are really about participating, right? But this larger partnerships driving a lot of that. Ready for me?
I have one more question, and this might be coming up later, I don't know. But the state-owned property along Peace Street, where there's tons of housing going up across the street at Smoky Hollow and whatnot, we have these rather aging facilities that are very underutilized. And I know at some point there was some conversation about potentially the state looking at releasing those properties. Is that those conversations still continuing?
Yes, it's in the next section here.
Okay.
I'll get to that.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so the final section is connections. So this is where we need to improve our corridors, fill in some gaps where connections are missing. Remember that graphic at the beginning, the Great Divide, that sort of Dawson McDowell that splits us in a half, and then some of our gateways, right? So we have several places where downtown could have a really great, wonderful entry, but does not currently. So you all have a downtown mobility study going on, which we're excited about. I think one opportunity there is to look at some of our major corridors and make them a lot more pedestrian friendly and a lot greener. Obviously, Dawson and McDowell are not streets that you all control, so there'd be some work there, but they serve as significant barriers. They are legitimately concerning for people to cross. We're fortunate not to have a proper highway coming through downtown, but these are not great experiences. There's a couple other roads like this in downtown where you have a lot of really fast-moving, often one-way traffic. So this is a real opportunity here. So I would encourage, through that study, looking at these corridors. Another opportunity is Glenwood Avenue. So a reminder, this study also included Glenwood South. Glenwood South's a very successful district. It's doing great on sales. It's doing great on growth. What it's not doing great on is its pedestrian scale infrastructure is not very good. And so it's becoming the densest part of the city. It's probably 1 or 2 buildings away from being the densest census tract in the city, only behind NC State's dorms. So this is a really dense growing place. Look at this sidewalk here. This is 200 block. I'm not sure where someone's supposed to walk. I mean, and I know there's tables and chairs. We want tables and chairs. We want people to activate the sidewalk. These are great restaurants. You got a fire hydrant almost in the middle of it. These are just really tight sidewalks. And so Glenwood South as a district does not have a very good pedestrian scale. And so the biggest catalytic project you could do for Glenwood South would be to improve its pedestrian infrastructure. It needs wider sidewalks. Those wider sidewalks are part of what lead to the conflict that leads to some of the safety issues you have. Some of those fights that break out at 2 o'clock in the morning are because people collided on really narrow, bad sidewalks. And then the sidewalks on some of the side streets barely exist or are not fully built out. So this is a real opportunity. We'd strongly encourage looking at Glenwood South's streetscape and then being able to put this into whenever your next transportation bond, because this would be a meaningful streetscape project, but it'd be huge for this neighborhood. Signature gateways, and we touched on some of this in the first study, but you have a lot of areas, for example, between Fayetteville Street and Wilmington and Salisbury that are not very nice looking. Think about, this is the view from the convention center in Marriott. So this weekend we'll have bluegrass here. Thousands of people will walk past this chain link fence around, I don't know what this is, electrical, and it could be a whole lot cooler, right? We could do something like this or many other things. There's a lot of creative people. This is just one example. But why don't we make these gateways more interesting? Because it would draw people from the street to those other streets so they feel less like a side street, right? So you hear that from Wilmington and Salisbury, feeling like we're a side street. Really, they're all part of the downtown core. So we ought to be able to create these gateways to draw people through. Mayor, this is to your question on the state government campus. We had great conversations with the state. I think there's a lot of alignment on what they're doing and what we're interested in. A few things that came out that are in the study, creating a signature gateway at P Street. P Street in general is a very uneven experience if you walk it. There's still places where the bike lane doesn't go all the way through. Obviously, there has to be a lot of car infrastructure because of the Capitol interchange. But it could be such a great connector. Seaboard Station is growing a lot. Glenwood South is growing a lot. And you think about bringing those people through, not just along P Street, but through into downtown, there's a great opportunity here. So creating a signature northern gateway at P Street right there could be North Carolina themed, given that it's at the state government campus. So there could be a good opportunity there for partnership. I believe there are some sites in the state government campus that would be great for public-private partnerships where they're underutilized. I think they're consolidating some of their campus in a good way. And so I think there's great opportunity there along P Street, for example. And then Caswell Square is one of our original squares. I think there's an opportunity there that there's some interest with for them to look long-term at eventually restoring at least part of that to being a square. So that would add some more public space as well. So we see this as a great opportunity. The state government campus is not terribly dynamic. And so I think through some good partnership and we have some good alignment here, this could be a whole lot better. And it helps them and it helps downtown as well. And then it also helps with our sort of idea of being the capital and celebrating North Carolina. So we could create a lot of energy here that we need with all the growth north of P Street and west of it. The Chavis Dick Strollway in connection to the South Park Heritage Walk is a really critical connection. I know we've talked a lot about that over the last few weeks, but we see that as really important. A lot of community interest in that. It's an opportunity to celebrate history, to create some new community, and to connect two really important parks, Chavis Park and Dix Park as well. So, plus we need a good, connection there along the southern edge of downtown. And then the final big connection recommendation is to connect downtown to Dix Park in a big, meaningful way. So the strollway should be done regardless. We need to do that. We need to do that soon. But we need a big, bold connection. There's a lot of gnarly infrastructure between here and Dix Park. It's like a half a mile away from the core of downtown, but it doesn't feel like it because there's a big interchange and then some very large roads. it is a challenging environment. And so creating something big and dynamic would help the park. If you think about Dreamville, everybody who goes to Dreamville parks downtown or they Uber, right? They're not parking at the park. Making that connection stronger would mean we'd get more of those people flowing in between the park and here. I think it would be a signature gateway. It'd be something that'd be a part of our skyline potentially. And I think it's time for us to figure it out. So we had a great master plan for the park, but the master plan doesn't really address how you connect downtown to the park. And the park is going to be a great center of activity. The Gibson Play Plaza is going to be incredible. We cannot wait for that, and there's going to be a whole lot more investment in that park. And so downtown needs to be connected, but we can also benefit it. If we're well connected, you don't need to build as much parking in that park, right? And so there's a lot of synergy here. It's time for us to figure out, is it a bridge? Is it a gondola? Is it something else? We need a big, bold connection, and I think it's time for us to have that conversation. And so that's a big recommendation from this. I think it'd be a huge catalytic project. So we're excited about that. This could be the view potentially from a bridge connecting from the park to downtown. It could connect just south of the amphitheater site, for example, similar topography there. So I think this is a great opportunity. So this is the connections. This is just a list of mostly what I get through. I didn't touch on Smoky Hollow Park, but making sure that's connected via bike and pedestrian is going to be really important too across P Street. So along with those P Street recommendations. So I'm going to pause here and take any feedback.
Mayor?
P Street, a firm was hired previously to design like a, I don't know, a streetscape for that. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it never got funded. And I don't know what the design even looks like, but there is something sitting there somewhere that we paid for that has never been utilized. So just FYI, staff.
Yeah, and then I had a question about the signature gateway to Dick's. I mean, if we wanted to move that from an idea to reality, like practically what steps would we have to take? I think having a roadmap's important, and I would assume that we would need to be coordinating with the Conservancy on funding and incorporating it into their master plan. So can we start those conversations? Have they already started? Where are we at on that?
So with, there is a study that is being funded on the gondola.
From the Conservancy?
So there's a Connecting Communities grant that's being pursued. So us, the Fletcher Foundation, and Dix Park Conservancy has funded someone to essentially do the groundwork, community engagement, to then pursue a federal grant that would allow us to actually study that. And so there's a good bit of federal funding available. You just have to tee it up the right way.
Yep.
So that is going on right now, moving quite quickly. And then I know city staff is involved in that as well.
Oh, great.
And so
All right.
the idea would be that would give the funds to meaningfully study this, because there's a lot of like engineering and stuff you got to figure out. Can you build a bridge? Can you build a gondola? Whatever it is. And then there is a good bit of federal funding available. So in Huntsville, Alabama, they just got $20 million for a very similar project for the bridge itself. And so there is federal funding available if you do the homework, which is great. So a lot of infrastructure funds have been released over the last couple of years from that big bill. So we think there's a good opportunity there. So that has started, but that ball will move over to staff at some point here soon.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for this section? Okay.
All right, other ideas that came up that just didn't really make it to sort of fruition here. Obviously, there was feedback in here about having a sports venue in downtown. That's a long-term play. Takes a lot of different moving pieces. Certainly, if there were an opportunity to host baseball, I'll just say downtown would be very open to that and would love to do that. So we'd be excited for that. Soccer as well. Downtown library came up a lot. Obviously, that's a county consideration, and there's a lot of pressure on the library system. Everybody wants a library in the neighborhood. I know they're looking at funding this year. And we have a good micro library on Fayetteville Street, but a larger venue that came up as well. Long-term consideration of the state's prison site, that's a much further out consideration, also complicated. And then additional bus terminals throughout the city as the system expands. So the system's getting bigger, made big investments. The ability to have some other nodes there where more routes come together also came through as well. So we had these slides of just sort of the various recommendations all together. Next steps, we're putting together sort of implementation committee to keep the focus on these recommendations, to keep this moving forward on our side. Would broach the idea of considering formal adoption of this plan and replacing some of the downtown plan as guidance. I think that's a conversation you all have to have. Ultimately, the work over the next few months is determining the priorities. So this is the first step in that, and the timing on all of this, and then ultimately considering how the next council engages with this plan. And so we want to make sure that this doesn't end soon, but that it continues, because a lot of this work is going to take years and multiple councils to support. So we have some next steps here. I'm also happy to go back into any of the recommendations. If there's some extra steps you want to touch on, we can sort of take it wherever you'd like.
Anybody have anything on this section?
I think we need to formally adopt the plan and let's move forward. We've spent a lot of time, money, and energy, and now it's time for action.
Yes. So what do you need from us? Do you need any formal action as a committee, or is it staying in committee?
I think if you want to advance it, at this point, you could make a recommendation out to the full council that the council consider adopting this as our new planning document for downtown, as the downtown plan. That's, if the committee feels comfortable making that recommendation, that's what I could envision being the next step.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Okay. I just want to add one more time, and I know a lot of work goes into this, but whatever we can be doing to just start getting stuff moving on the ground, I think that sends a huge message to the business owners who've invested, to residents who are looking to invest. I think we did sort of that day zero work already with the trash receptacles and the tree wells, but I really think the sooner we can get some stuff moving, better. So if there's opportunities to knock small pieces off or funding available, please, I would encourage you to bring them to the full council so we can get moving on some things.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Bill, have you talked to the county about a downtown library?
We've not had a conversation with them about it, no.
They're coming to us for a work session.
And have you talked to the county about their GSA building near Smoky Hollow?
Yeah, we have had conversations about their property, so we've had some good conversations there about what their strategies are and all of that, but we've not had one about downtown library, but we've had it about both that and their Fayetteville Street property.
Okay. Is that property soon to be released for an RFP? What's their time frame?
Not quite sure. I would want to follow up with you to make sure I could share what would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Yeah. Councilman report?
Before we adjourn, I know we've had the HBCUs kind of like in a holding pattern. I would like to suggest maybe we have Dr. Dillard invite her into either the next meeting or whatever fits into her schedule, just so we can kind of talk about the things with Shaw. I know St. August is probably going to be on hold for a little while, but I don't know that we want to necessarily hold up Shaw waiting for what's going to happen, whatever, with St. August. So just to kind of not have that item be so stagnant. So I don't know what the process is, but maybe to reach out to her and have her come in and give us some updates, and we give her an update in terms of where we are with planning some of the things we talked about as it relates to Shaw.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the last item in committee, so it'd be great if we could take that up next meeting.
Sure. We'll reconnect and let you know if we'll be in position to do it. I know she's a very busy woman, so we'll see how her schedule aligns with October or November on that.
Okay.
Well, I think it would also be important to ask if there is an update.
Yeah, we'll find out. We'll figure out how to make best use of the committee's time on that topic, but we'll connect with her.
I know they've gone through some iterations of planning, so it may be helpful for us to kind of hear some updates from her with some planning that she and the board have, because I sat in on a meeting, so I know that there's some updates that she may be willing to share with us. So.
Absolutely. Happy to connect with her.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.